every single full season that Football Ventures have had as Bolton Wanderers owners, the Trotters have improved on the previous campaign. They won promotion from League Two in 2021, thanks to 16 wins in their last 22. They achieved a 9th place finish in their first season up in League One, and they've just achieved back-to-back playoff finishes after narrowly missing out on automatic promotion last season. No secret as to what the Wanderers' intentions are this season. They want to go a one better. They want to rake into the top two, but it's an increasingly competitive League One. So, do Ian Evatt's side have what it takes to finally get over the line and make their long-awaited championship return? That's what we're about to discuss in this Summer Deep Dive. Yes, welcome along to the latest EFL Debate Summer Deep Dive, one of 72 we're doing across the EFL between mid-June and mid-July. Already the full set for League Two uploaded to YouTube and to Spotify, as well as a few for League One, so get yourself subscribed once you're done with this one. For now, delighted to be joined by Colin Yates from the Fanzone Podcast of Bolton Wanderers. Good evening, Colin.
Good evening, Gab.
Good evening, yes. Big question to you to start off with. Are Bolton Wanderers ready to make their long-awaited championship return this season?
I'm sure we're going to get into this further, but are we ready? Absolutely. Will we do it? I'm not so sure. I'm not as confident as I were last season, which might sound a bit of a silly thing to say because obviously the squads are a season with more experience, so as a result, you would think that that would be of benefit. But I do think that the league's a little bit harder this next season. Thank you for having me on, by the way, Gabby. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. We've touched on the ownership before, but I think it's worth just reiterating the work that Sharon Britton has done and how important she is as a cog in this Bolton Wanderers machine.
Yeah, she's important, of course. I mean, I'd certainly say she's probably been more important in previous years than she certainly has been, or certainly will be moving forward. I think it's been made clear to all Bolton Wanderers fans that she is the figurehead of the football club. However, she doesn't necessarily pull all the strings when it comes to investment into the first team and the football club as a whole. She is part of a rather large consortium that we are learning more and more about with each passing month. But yeah, she's vitally important, certainly from a communication perspective in terms of obviously with ourselves as fans and bridging the gap between the club and the supporters. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And you've got Chris Markham there as well as technical director. But talk to me about Ian Evatt, Colin, because obviously he's done some fantastic work in the main. There's a big feeling that he's got to learn a few lessons from last season. What are those lessons for you?
Well, I mean, we've spoke about it a lot on our podcast, Gab, over should we have a plan B or should plan A just be as best it possibly can? I think the evidence would suggest, we shouldn't really base it on the final against Oxford alone, which he wasn't able to adapt for whatever reason, be it injuries, players not 100%, players not available, such as Randall Williams, but in game he didn't adapt to that within that particular match. So that's obviously a concern if we're using our kind of recent bias over his tactical skill set. But I do think that he does have the capacity and the ability to be able to look at alternative formations. What I would say is he needs to ensure that the players that he's got at his disposal are able to adapt in game to them tactical changes as well. Because I think at this level, as good as the players that we've got are, and certainly were last season, your likes of Paris Magoma and players of that ilk who we had, I do question because some of them are are learning on the job and learning how to deal with playing for a club like us, do they have the abilities to be able to adapt in game when called upon? So I'm hoping as time progresses with Ian Evatt, he signs players who do have that ability to be able to adapt. Because I think, going back to your original question, that's one thing that Ian Evatt does need to show a lot of Bolton fans, that he's got the abilities to be able to change tactically when necessary.
Yeah, I always think of management where you want to have your plan A, and that's great. And I'm not actually one of these people that says you've got to have a plan B, but I do believe that you've got to refine plan A, and there might be certain parts of plan A that aren't quite working, and you sort of tweak it a little bit. So it's not like you rip up plan A and go to something completely different, because I do believe in having a coherent playing identity, but you also want to have some adaptability within that, and hopefully Ian Evatt can find that this season.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, Gab, but I was just saying he really, really wants to have, ideally, 2 players for every position, but he also wants players at his disposal who are able to play across various positions as well. And I think we've kind of seen that with the signing, and I will be asking you a question or two later on, Gab, in the podcast about our signings that we've brought in so far. But from what I can ascertain, is it Lolos? Is the correct pronunciation? Mm-hmm. I think he can play across multiple positions, and he's quite fluid in his abilities as a footballer. So maybe that's what he's going to want more from his players, that adaptability. So yeah, I'll get into my questions for you later on, which is probably a little bit strange for you, because I've got a few questions from a few Bolton fans for you.
No, I look forward to it. Cole, we did check the sound beforehand, but it's coming out a little bit loud, and I'm wondering if you could give it a crack without the headphones, if there's any chance, or is that a set thing in terms?
Yeah, I'll give it a go. Yeah,
give it a go. Okay, thanks.
Give me 1 second.
Yeah, appreciate that. So I'm kind of going to have a look at the Bolton squad while Cole resets things, because I think Nathan Baxter, keeping him fit this season is going to be very, very important, because I rate him very highly. But Cole, I wanted to come to you in terms of I want to look at how close Bolton are to a starting 11 that's good enough to finish in the top 2. And obviously there's the nuance of the depth and injuries, and you're going to need a full squad of players. But if we were to just focus on a top 2 starting 11, so if you were to put aside whether you like a player and you've actually got to look at whether or not you think they're up to a certain level, I'd like to go through the squad that way to start with. So
yeah, of course.
Sure. So Nathan Baxter to start with in the goalkeeping jersey. I imagine you feel like he's one of the best goalkeepers in the division. It's just about a case of keeping him available for the whole 46 games.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't just think keeping him available for the 46 games, but just keeping him available full stop, i.e. not losing him, is a concern for a lot of fans. And certainly I will put myself in that category, because he is that good of a goalkeeper at the level that we're at. But yeah, I mean, he is absolutely the starter. I think bringing in a number 2 who is of decent experience at the level as well, and who's going to push him with Luke Southwood, I think that's on paper a really good signing. I think you do need 2 goalkeepers at the top of the level in the division that you're in to try and push you to win a title, and they obviously push one another. And not only that, Nathan Baxter has had somewhat of a questionable injury record throughout his career, so it's good to have somebody that can step into his shoes, hopefully without any issues. The goalkeeping position, in my opinion, cost us promotion last season, losing Nathan Baxter for 2 months. Or was it 3 months? I'm not sure, 2 or 3 months. In my opinion, cost us enough points for us not to get automatic promotion. So it just shows how much of a vital position it is.
Yeah, certainly does. So I think you'll agree, Carl, you'll be happy to put a tick in the goalkeeping position, because I think you've got one of the best goalkeepers in League One, and I think we can be very, very happy with Luke Southwood coming in if needs must. So I think that's worth a tick. Now, obviously, Ian Evatt plays 3-4-1-2, or 3-1-4-2 or some sort of variation of that. So we're looking at three centre halves. So that so that right-sided centre-back spot, are we looking at George Johnston coming in after his injury, after spending last season out injured?
Yeah, we are, but not on the right side. He'll be slotting in to the left side, which is his natural position. Hopefully, he's fit enough to start the season. I think you would hope he is. He's been out. He was out the whole last season. He didn't kick a football last season, so fingers crossed that he can slot into that left side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, I think Johnston's going to be really important next season if we can get him back to his best. But then on the right side, you've got Owen Toll. What sort of influence do you see him having next season?
Again, he falls under a similar category as Nathan Baxter for me, Gab. I think he is a player that we could lose because I think his ceiling, that new popular word that people use these days, is quite high. Obviously, he's getting into the Northern Ireland squads regularly and he's starting as well for games for them. He is a very, very good defender at the level as a natural defender as well. The old-fashioned way of defending, he's got that down to a T. And I am slightly concerned that we might lose him if I am honest. I think there's a bit of an unbalance in that defensive structure in terms of the personnel, in my opinion, at the moment. Something seems amiss.
What do you think is imbalanced?
Well, I just think there's too many defenders, three positions. You look at George Johnson, you look at Jack Idale on the left, you look at Owen Toll, you look at Gethin Jones, but of course we've just signed Chris, excuse my pronunciation, Marino. So obviously he's a centre half as well. Obviously Rico's not going anywhere. So there seems to be a lot of defenders. I'm just thinking in my head, maybe they're preparing themselves for an offer for Owen Toll and maybe an offer too good to turn down possibly. I might be wrong with that, I might be way off the mark, but it's just my assessment from where I'm sat.
Okay. So you said he's got a high ceiling, quote unquote. Do you think he's got a high enough floor to find that consistency that would be needed? Let's say Owen Toll does stay. Is he going to give you the consistency that you need, for that top two push?
Yeah, because he played pretty much the whole last season out of position. I think the reason why he was signed originally was to be the long-term successor of Gethin Jones. But because of George Johnson's injury, he's been having to fill in the left side of centre half, occasionally centre half. So, absolutely. People give him a little bit of stick at some points throughout last season, Owen Toll, but I think they quickly forgot that he was playing out of position for the majority of it.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So I think we've got two ticks there for George Johnston and Owen Toll. Now, Ricardo Santos, I don't know.
Like Marmite with some Bolton fans in.
Yeah, I don't know if we've got some slightly different perspectives on Ricardo Santos.
I don't. Go on.
Well, for me, I recognise that Rico maybe wasn't quite at the level he's really capable of last season. At the same time, I just feel Rico at his best is one of the best defenders in the league. And for me, you want to be keeping hold of him and making sure that you've got him in there to lead your aspiration push.
I think he's actually more popular with opposition fans than he is with our own, in the most part, which is a very strange thing to say. I'm not obviously speaking for all Bolton fans here, but from what you read and what you see, he kind of splits opinion a little bit. Me, I'm on your side of the fence, Gab. Okay. I love the guy. I think he's a colossal at centre half. I think often people see his slow build up from the back, but he is the focal point to that build up. Obviously, you can only really rely on the players in front of him to make the movement to enable him to make the right pass. I think his vision's exceptional at times. He plays some phenomenal cross-field balls into the channels and sets up play. Similar to maybe a B-Tech version of Van Dijk, possibly, in my view. not buying. I'm not comparing.
I know. There's the headline.
The way he plays is similar. He's dominant. Okay. He's obviously organisation and whatnot. I love the bloke. I think he's fantastic, and I think he's easily our best centre half.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, okay. Well, in terms of the best 11, then I've got 3 ticks there for Owen Toll, Rico Santos, and George Johnston. If they're all fit, present, and available, I think we can agree that gets you. That could get you over the line. I guess what's interesting, and you picked up on this earlier, Cole, is that you've got Will Forrester, you got Jack Ardell, you got Gethin Jones. You got Chris Farino, and you got Luke Matheson. So that's 4 other defenders. Now, so I'm just wondering...
Are we putting Luke Matheson into that conversation as a defender? Because obviously he's more of a wing back, isn't he, really? And
would you class him as a... okay, that's interesting. So I had him pinned down as a right centre-back just because
we have him... Well, I mean, again, not speaking for all Bolton fans, and they'll either be nodding or shaking their head.
You're going to caveat every opinion, Carl, by saying I'm not
going to caveat every opinion, but I'm going to start by doing it. Of course, I think a lot of Bolton fans do have Luke Matheson as a right wing back. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I'll cross that one out. So okay. Well, actually, then so you got 4. So you got Will Forrester, Jack Ardell, Gethin Jones, and Chris Farino. Do you think one of those 4 are going to be offloaded, or is it going to depend on whether you cash in on Owen Toll or Rico Santos, or how?
I think. Sorry, go on. As far as cashing in on Santos is concerned, that Mark Isles, our local reporter, has done an article to suggest the complete opposite, that Rico will be going absolutely nowhere, and that's come straight from the horse's mouth in terms of Ian Evatt. So it'd have to be a hell of an offer. To pry him away from us. As I said before, my concern is with Owen Toll.
Did the horse say nay? We're not accepting it.
Well done. It'd have to be a hell of an offer for Rico to go. Again, my concern lies with Owen Toll, but I say it's a concern. If it's a good offer and it's an offer that we all accept that's worth it, we've got to cash in when the opportunity arises, don't we? But that's not me trying to sell Owen Toll because I love him to stay. But I'm just, like I said, there's a lot of centre halves there, aren't there, that we've just mentioned.
Yeah, no, it's interesting competition. But you know what, Carl? I actually quite like that you're in this position where you've got 7 players who could play centre half, and you wouldn't be disappointed if any of those 7 started. I think that's a good position to be in, because you want to be in that position where if Rico gets injured, you've got Chris Farino to come in. You've got Jack Ardell to come in on the left if you've not got George Johnson. Gethin Jones. Chris Farino is a great defender. Forrester. I think that's a really healthy position to be in. So I think you're well covered. And again, you'd rather have that depth than not. So yes, there's a conversation that one of them might be offloaded, but I think you're in a pretty good spot. Yeah. Now, right wing back, Josh Cogley. I'm really curious to discuss this one with you, Cole, because there's one part of me that says Josh Cogley is a brilliant athlete. His ability to get up and down the pitch is absolutely crucial for a role as demanding as the wing back role. There's another part of me that wonders whether Josh Cogley is technical enough for what Ian Evatt likes from his wing backs, especially if you want to make them a really prominent feature of your game. I'm wondering, is there a world where you can get more out of your wing backs next season? And do we ask that question as to whether Josh Cogley is going to be at the level?
Good observation, that, because I don't think that Ian Evatt wholeheartedly thinks that he's good enough to be producing week in, week out for the whole of the season. And I say that because we signed, unfortunately, didn't really look out for him, but Calvin Ramsey from Liverpool on loan towards the back end of last season, who of course is a right wing back. And I think he would have brought him in because of his technical ability as a wing back, obviously coming from Liverpool, and his pedigree as a footballer. Obviously, terrible injury record, and he's actually gone on loan to Wigan for this part of this season. But yeah, so that kind of like makes you think that a little bit of competition for places on the right side is what Josh Cogley needs. And he played a lot of football last season, Cogley, and I think he was pretty consistent, to be fair to him, 7 out of 10 every week, but he's never going to win you games in that final third, which I think the way we play is the expectation of your left and right wing backs. They're practically wingers, aren't they? So they need to produce in that final third. So as good as he is defensively, as good as his overall game is, I do think competition for places is something that Ian Evatt's looking for. And just like I said, look back at last season with the sign of Ramsey is probably evidence of that.
I think it's really interesting getting the balance right between wingbacks and midfielders, where you can have, if you have wingbacks who are super attacking and are given license to create a ton of chances, then you've got to make sure that you've got that balance in midfield. And I suppose what I do like about Cogley, if I was to make the case for Cogley, I'd say you tend to have a 1 and a 2 in midfield. So you have Josh Sheehan as the So actually, does it make sense to have somebody like Josh Cogley, who's very good in recovery running, whereas a more mercurial wing back who's great going forward might actually leave you a bit open. But then is that also where you'd want to maybe rely on your outside centre half or something like that? So I feel a bit conflicted, to be honest.
Yeah, the outside centre half is used very regularly in the way that we play. Certainly in possession as well. I mean, obviously that's what we're mainly talking about. But yeah, in possession, in transition a lot. Obviously, we are looking to utilise our wide centre half from an attacking perspective quite a lot. So yeah, I think there's a balance in there.
So what would you, if I was to push you now, do you think Josh Cogley can be a starting right wing back for a top 2 side and be that?
Well, I think
what you think.
Yeah, because I think as critical as people can be of him, he was 7 out of 10 every week, and I think he got in the play. I think he got the player fullback of the year or something like that. I'm not sure, or he won some award in League One last season.
There wasn't. It's not like there was a Connor Bradley in the division last season, though, Cole.
No, but yeah, that's half the problem, though. You can't really compare him to him because he's an exceptional talent and he's proven what he can do at the highest level. So you're never going to.
Can I play devil's advocate, though, Cole? Is that, why not try and find another Connor Bradley? There's going to be other players in the youth.
Oh, they did. They did, didn't they? They tried, like I said before, they got in Calvin Ramsey in hopes not only because he came from Liverpool, of course, but they hoped he could try and replicate what Connor did. So it just didn't work. So maybe that's what they are looking for. It certainly wouldn't surprise me if we saw a loan for a right wing back again.
Yeah,
and similarly on the left hand side as well.
Yeah, well. So okay, so I'm hesitant about putting a tick next to Josh Cogley just because I'm still not quite sure that he's going to give you the output that you're going to need, but I can kind of see both sides. So let's come back to that one. Like you mentioned, you've got Williams on the left wing back. Again, that looks like an area where you could possibly upgrade on or at least add another option to.
Yeah, and I think we will. I think it's a really strong area. Sorry, an area that was strong last season. Should I say? If I put my teeth back in, because we of course had Randell, we had Nathaniel Better, and we had Zach Ashworth as well, all of whom were left-sided options. So I think the next signing will likely be a left back / midfielder, or certainly somebody who can play at left back, but he's more offensively minded, possibly.
Okay. What did you think of Randall Williams this season last year?
Randall Williams really, really aggravates me because I think he has all the attributes to be a top wing back, but he often irks challenges and pulls out, and it really irritates me. That's my only criticism of Randall Williams. I think defensively he was the best option that we had last season. With the argument of Zach Ashworth, I thought Zach Ashworth defensively was pretty good. He was certainly better defensively than Better. In the final third, he's good. He's good enough to be a top 2 fullback, you might say. But as I say, it really winds me up when he doesn't go wholeheartedly into challenges and he's a bit was a bit soft. Then that's only my personal opinion of him. I really like him as a footballer, except that.
Okay. So I think definitely from a depth point of view, you're going to need a couple of wing backs. But I would probably think maybe a couple of players that are going to really try and be first choice. So yeah, it might be that you dip into the loan market. So we'll have to see. So central midfield then, and this is an area where you've got lots of options because you've got Carl Dempsey there, you've got Aaron Morley, who was probably one of your best players in 22-23, not quite as influential last season. You got Aaron Sheehan there. No, Aaron Sheehan? Josh Sheehan there. And and you got George Thomason, but you've got CMG who can play as a number 10, and you've also got Claddy Lolos from Crawley.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's options, aren't there? I mean, what I'll say about Carlos Mendes Gomez is we're not going to see him till December, from what we understand. Before we go on, I do have a question for you, actually, about that left side. Now, I don't know whether this guy falls into more of a midfielder or more of a left wing back / left midfielder, but Nicky Cadden's been heavily linked with us following his in leaving Barnsley. Would that be an option for us, Gab, on the left side?
I think you can do better than Nicky Cadden personally. I think what you get with Nicky Cadden is probably, I think he's going to be a 7 out of 10 League One left wing back. I think he can get forward. I think in 22-23 he certainly showed that he can put some quality deliveries in, and he can take people on as well. Probably player of the year in League Two or a contender in 21-22 for Forest Green when they, under Rob Edwards, they had very attacking wing backs. So he can do it. However, his form for Barnsley dropped off quite a bit last season. And I just think I'm not confident enough, combined with the fact that there's probably question marks over him defensively as well. I'm not sure that his attacking output is going to be quite good enough to counterbalance that if we're holding him to such high standards, which I feel we have to for every possible starting Bolton player, just because of how demanding League One's going to be. You've got to hold to really high standards.
So you're saying that he wouldn't necessarily suit an Ian Evatt team based on how we play?
I think if top 6 is the aim, I think Nicky Cadden will be a good signing. But I think if you're striving for top 2, I don't think he's quite going to be at the level that you need personally.
Interesting. Right. Okay. Fair enough. We've seen that he's been linked, you see, in recent weeks, so it's a question that I wanted to ask you.
Okay, sure. We'll see who you go for. So again, I wanted to come back to that midfield area. How are you feeling about
that? Well, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I don't really know a great deal about Lolos. Who I understand is very versatile, and I think he played quite a bit kind of further forward last season. But is he very? Could you envision him playing in more of a central midfield role for us, Gab? Is that what you think? That's where he's been signed?
Yeah, I mean, I would say Claddy Lolos. I think of him at his best driving forward from midfield and getting shots away. He scored 13 goals last season. 5 assists. So I think that's his main strength, that he's a very powerful dribbler. So maybe there's going to be shades of Paris Magoma in there. And yes, he can play a variety of different roles. I wouldn't really think of him as someone who would play anywhere other than one of the 2 8s that you'd operate, that you'd play in that sort of 3-1-4-2. That's where I see him really.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Because obviously, in terms of from a final third perspective, he's not likely to get in the team over obviously either Dion Charles.
I couldn't see him getting in ahead of. So yes, he can play up top, and which is where I think he came through the ranks at Plymouth Argyle. Over Victor Adeboyejo, Dion Charles, Aaron Collins, and then. You never know. You might want to add another striker to that mix as well. I'm not sure.
Lundalu's in that mix as well, in here. Not to forget.
Do you think he might be offloaded in Lundalu?
Possibly, but as far as now is concerned, he is within that conversation as a striking option, and so Lolos is unlikely to get in. ahead of any of them four, I would have thought.
Yeah, I agree. So I would see Lolos as an 8, but I think he can drive forward and get shots away. So a little bit different to maybe the kind of your pretty passing midfielders like your Aaron Morleys or your Josh Ians.
Is he more? Do you think he's a midfield replacement, like replacement for Paris Magoma?
Stylistically, yes. Although I would maybe say I'm not sure Clyde Lolos can quite hit the level. I think Paris Magoma had more potential than Clyde Lolos has. So again, I'm not sure he massively improves the first 11. I think he can make a contribution, but I don't see it as a signing that wow, I'm amazed by. So I'm a little bit surprised that you went for him. Not stunned, but yeah, I'm not sure he would be my choice.
Right, okay. Well, to answer your question in terms of the midfield, obviously, again, similar to the defence, really, there's an argument there, or there's thoughts to suggest that somebody might be on the way out. A lot of people are thinking about maybe Aaron Morley, but he's not long since signed a new contract.
When did he sign his new deal, Carl?
Last season. I stand corrected on that. Please, in the chat if I'm wrong with that, but I'm pretty sure that Aaron Morley signed a new deal last year. Kyle Dempsey has been linked as well. Rumours,
right?
But again, is he a replacement? Can he step up into Paris Magoma's shoes?
Yeah,
he was playing a lot last season with a back injury. Sorry, just to add.
No, sure. Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting point. I wanted to come back to Morley because I almost wonder if he needs to go somewhere where he's going to be the main man, because in 22-23 he was the one that was starting regularly, and he was talked about as having been converted from this deep line playmaker at Rochdale into almost a complete midfielder. But last season he seemed to lose a lot of form, I guess, and I wonder whether he lost some confidence through being out of the team and maybe the dynamics being a bit different. And
possibly, he is contracted until June 27. He signed a new contract in December of last year, Aaron Morley. I think with Aaron, I don't know whether I'm right with this, but he's a young lad who has just had his firstborn child. So you do wonder off the pitch whether that possibly could have affected him in terms of his abilities to then get into the first team.
Yeah, I mean, not to go too personal because I'm not sure that would be fair, but I could imagine it's very difficult for a young lad to become a father at such a young age.
24. I mean, I was 31 when was it 32? So 32 when I had my little boy, and it was hard enough at 32. So maybe at 20. These are the type of things that people don't necessarily think about when it comes to footballers, but. Yeah, I think that could possibly have been a contributing factor to his lack of form last season, possibly.
Yeah, maybe that's a factor. I hope that Aaron Morley, because I think that Aaron Morley, when he's on form, can be one of the best midfielders in this league. No question about that. I've seen his ability on the ball from his time at Rochdale. His technique and his passing range is absolutely wonderful. So I just hope that if he can get a bit of stability in maybe his, not saying there isn't in his, but you know what I mean, it's get to grips with all those sorts of challenges. On the pitch, I think he's definitely got it. So fingers crossed he can.
Well, I mean, the club thinks he has as well because he got a contract extension until 2027, didn't he? So he's obviously producing, and the club rate him very highly, don't they? Excuse me.
Yeah, absolutely. But you also rate Josh Sheehan very highly as well. How important do you think he's going to be this season?
Yeah, well, we won Player of the Year last season, Gab, so he's absolutely vital to the way we play. Again, not trying to sell him, but I think if an offer came in, they might think about it because he is 29. He is wanting most likely to try and get even closer to that Wales starting 11 or certainly into the squads because at 29, he needs to be playing at a higher level if he wants to do that.
Is the Americas coming up in a couple of years? He'll want to be in the qualification.
He'll want to try and be involved in the squad for that, won't he? So, like, you need to think about that with him. I don't want him to leave, of course I don't. But obviously, it wouldn't surprise me if an offer came in that he and the club will consider it if it was a decent offer.
Do you think that if Josh Sheehan went, then Aaron Morley might become more important? Because I almost wonder if there's a challenge for the club to incorporate both Sheehan and Morley simultaneously, where it's like you have your Sheehan at the base of midfield, you have your Carl Dempsey bringing that to sort of bit of dynamism on the left, and then you have your ball carrier on the right, like Paris Magoma. Whereas maybe there's a reticence to play two playmakers, if you like. Whereas I just wonder if Josh Sheehan were to leave, does that actually carve a bit more of a place out for Aaron Morley, possibly?
Well, I think the club must be thinking along them lines because of the contract that they give him. And let's be honest, when Josh Sheehan was 24, I think he was most likely playing in Swansea's reserves.
Or Newport, maybe.
Or Newport, possibly. Just signed for Newport or in League Two. So my point there is players sometimes take a little bit of time to become the best version of themselves, don't they? So there's plenty of growth yet in Aaron Morley. David's just put in the chat here, Bolton will bring Luke Connell back. It's sold a midfielder. Yeah, good shout. I mean, I'd love Luke Connell back.
We seem to talk about him on every podcast about him. I hope no one from Barnsley is watching this. They'd get very annoyed if I was talking.
Yeah, you've been in trouble a few times in the past with that one, haven't you, Gab?
With Mr. Simcox, yeah, I have.
Yeah.
I'm going to say no more on that matter.
Yeah, that's a different conversation, isn't it, bringing him back? But possibly, yeah, maybe Aaron Morley could step into Josh Sheehan's shoes because he was ahead of him not too long ago.
Yeah,
in the pecking order. So.
George Thomason, Cole. We've spoke about Bolton maybe missing a bit of bite in their midfield last season. Do you think George Thomason can be the one to provide it, or do you think that's a Carl Dempsey job, or do you think you need to recruit that in the summer?
I think we need to recruit it. I'll be honest with you. I don't think George Thomason is that player. I just think he's proven that with his disciplinary record and his inability to be able to time his tackles. I think he often does that to try and put a stamp on the game because there is nobody else doing it in our midfield. I think we need to invest in that position. That's why I was asking you earlier about Lolos and whether or not he could play in that deep position, not deep, but that number 8 position to kind of be that player. I'm not sure, but I don't know the Lolos lad at all, very well at all. So that's kind of why I'm quizzing you on that. But I just don't see George as that player. People do, but he's too good of a footballer to be that SHIT house. Do you get what I mean? I think he just does that.
You need to recruit less good footballers, Carl. That's what you need to do.
Well, I just think that he isn't that footballer, in my opinion. I think he has to do it because nobody else does.
Interesting. Okay. We'll see. What do you think is in store for Carl Dempsey this season, Carl?
Yeah. It's a big season for him, to be honest. He's as I said before, he was playing a large percentage of last season with a back injury. So I think he was playing through the pain barrier, as they say. But there's obviously no question that he will recognise that it wasn't his best season by any stretch of the imagination, and he does need to hit the ground running this season. He's contracted until June of 2026. We've still got a little bit of time on his contract, but I think the club are, always willing. I think always willing or will be willing to look at all offers for all players. And I think if he doesn't have a good season this season or he isn't in the team come January, then they may look to cash in.
Well, we'll wait and see. So, but certainly an interesting midfield option there. I mean, if we're looking at three areas. You've got Kyle Dempsey there, Mendes Gomez to come back after in New Year, Aaron Morley, Josh Sheehan, Judge Thomason, and Clyde Lolos. So five players there immediately, and there's possibility you might recruit one more. So it is going to look like one of the stronger areas of the squad. Go on.
Yeah, sorry, Gab, but one question I won't mind asking you on this midfield area, and whether or not this player falls into more of a Aaron Collins type of position or not. You'll have to correct me, but we've been heavily linked this last couple of days with Joel Randell. Willie Morgan on Twitter has asked me to ask you your thoughts on Lolos. Of course, we've just discussed him, but the potential signing of Joel Randell and how he'd fit into Bolton's side.
Yeah, so Joel Randall's a really interesting player for me. He came through the Exeter Academy in sort of the late 2010s and sort of broke into the first team and had a fantastic. I think it was the 2021 campaign where he was this direct winger, if you like, very real live wire, such an exciting player. But then he got this long-term injury that set him back a little bit. I can't remember actually if that was before or after his move to Peterborough, but certainly his move to Posh didn't quite work out as he wanted initially. And for a year or two, people were questioning the £1 million outlay. But what happened last year was the departures of various key players kind of opened a gap for him again. And that was what allowed him to sort of reinvent himself as a bit of a number 10, if you like. Now, what I think was really interesting for him at Peterborough last season was that he wasn't really the one that got the big numbers. He was the one that kind of linked the midfield to the attack, but he sort of joined in it with his share of midfield work, kind of carried the ball forward a bit, made some good runs off the ball to create space for other players, and kind of brought the likes of Poku and Mason Clark into the game. But it was those sort of wide forwards who took on, who got the big numbers, if you like. He probably had the most freedom, whereas Randall was more of a system player, if you like. I mean, he did that job really well. So I think, again, to kind of summarise, I think it depends what you're looking for with Joel Randell. If you're looking for someone to conjure up the big numbers, I would say maybe no, because I'm not sure he's going to be as productive as he'd need. But if you're looking at someone who can create space for other players, then I think he can do that. But the way your midfield operates, you tend to play with 1 6 and 2 8. So are you going to change that and go with 2 6s and 1 10, or are you going to figure it, or how's that going to work?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? I guess could you see him in our side then, given the potential fluidity of the formation, given what we discussed earlier?
Yeah, I could maybe see him as maybe a left-sided 8, possibly. Especially, maybe I could see it working if you've got a left wing back that really likes to get forward and possibly and really attack goal. And I think he could sort of facilitate that. So yeah, I could see him taking on maybe one of those wide 8 spots and sort of linking up with the wing back. So yeah, I think you could do that, but you've got to make sure that you've got the sort of the end product, if you like, or the productivity in other players. But I think he can be a very consistent player, which I think he showed at Peterborough last season.
Yeah, interesting. No, I think that could be considered possibly one of our marquee signings, maybe if he was to jump ship from Peterborough.
I mean, I wouldn't class it quite as a marquee signing, because I think you've got to sign someone who really racks up the big numbers to consider it a marquee signing. But I think it could be a useful signing. But I wouldn't sort of look at it and say, "Wow, you signed Joel Randall."
Yeah, like Aaron Collins, for example, was in January.
Yeah, sure.
That's a marquee signing at this level.
Yeah, that makes sense. Should we go to the attacking options then? Dion Charles, Cole, are you confident that he's going to stay this season?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's come out in the local press today actually that he's going nowhere. Quite a common theme with some of our key players, actually, which is quite reassuring. I'd actually heard from the horse's mouth that he wasn't going a week or two ago. So that was nice for me to see Mark Isles write that article this morning, which reconfirmed what he'd said. So that was really good to hear. So yeah, absolutely. Again, every player's got his price on it, Gab. You know, there's every chance that a Dion Charles is going to want to be signed because he's worth a gamble, maybe of a club in the division above for the money that we would expect to get for him. You know, so maybe if that happens, he would leave. But yeah, at the moment, I can't see him leaving unless something big happens.
So just to kind of recap on where we are in terms of looking at a top 2 best 11, I think you'll agree that, you know, we can put a tick next to Josh Sheehan's name because I think he's going to be very important next season. I mean, who would you put alongside Josh Sheehan in midfield next season?
Well, he played on his own, to be honest with you, for the majority towards the back end of the season.
Okay, so who would be the 2/8s to play slightly more?
Yeah, the 2/8s is the question. I think as it stands, it would be it'd be Carl Dempsey.
Okay,
because you know what you get from him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, 7 out of 10. I'm struggling on that left side, to be honest.
George Thomason.
Yeah, it can only be George, can't it? Again, in on that left side because he offers that balance as well, I guess. So yeah, George on the left, and then of course Aaron Collins and Dion Charles up front as the 2. Okay.
So if we're saying Sheehan's definitely going to be at the level that's needed, are you confident that Dempsey and Thomason, or which of Dempsey or Thompson?
No, as I said before, I think then that's why I was kind of like thinking about George, and I was reluctant to say Kyle because of the poor season that he had last season. Because I want us to sign that marquee kind of central midfielder, dominant, put the foot in, dictate the game, you know, carry the ball, a bit aggressive, both in and out of possession. That's what I want to see. So I'd like that person to be on that right-hand side of that 3, personally. But it's not happened yet. So as it stands, it'll be Carl Dempsey.
Okay, so we'll have a tick next to Josh Sheehan, but maybe a few question marks elsewhere. I think we can definitely put a tick next to Dion Charles because he's such a reliable goal scorer at this level. Well, that would be my assertion. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I think you can put a tick next to Aaron Collins as well, to be honest.
Okay. Yeah.
Because Aaron Collins showed glimpses with Dion towards the back end of last season that something was going to be jealous, something's going to come to fruition there. You can just see it. They've got that understanding. But obviously to add, Dion is currently injured, you know, so will he start the season? He's had the majority of the summer in a knee brace. It's come out today to say that he's not going anywhere and he'll be fit for the start of the season. So, so maybe it will start, but we'll have to wait and see.
Okay. So what I've got at the moment, just to focus on the best 11, Nathan Baxter, Ricardo Santos, Owen Toll, George Johnston. Well, Toll, Santos, Johnston.
Yeah.
I got Josh Sheehan in midfield, and I got Charles and Collins up top. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we've got 7 definites who we've agreed are good enough for a top 2 side. But I think we can probably say there's a few doubts over the wing back spots, both in terms of depth and in terms of first choice ability, and maybe a few doubts in midfield, even though you've got lots of options there.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely.
Okay. So it's going to be interesting to see whether you add another midfielder. I can't see you signing 2 midfielders, so I think you are probably going to have to gamble to some extent that a Morley or a Thomason can make that jump, or that Dempsey can rediscover his 22-23 form.
Well, Simon Riley asked me to ask you before on Twitter positions that you feel that we need to strengthen? I mean, we've kind of gone through it, I guess, in the positions that we've still got, or that we feel that aren't top 2 quality. But what about if it was you, Gab? Obviously, we've done this together, haven't we? Really, but
Sure.
what would you say? What would you say the positions are that we need to strengthen?
I would say, I think I would, depending on what the budget is, obviously, because I think that's going to dictate how many. So I feel like I would probably prioritize the wing back spots and put the budget into them, because I think that while I'm not 100% on the midfield, I do see enough options there where there's a good chance that one or two of them are going to make the jump that we sort of want them to. Whereas I probably would say that in terms of the wing back spots, I'd want to try and find another Connor Bradley. I'd want to try and upgrade on Randall Williams at left wing back, and because I do think that if you can have players that really improve you and add that sort of sharpness and agility and bit of quality in the final third and really stretch the game, I think that's a game changer, and I think that's the type of thing that's gonna get you from a playoff side to a top 2 side. So that's what I'll be looking at. And it might be that you have to look into the loan market to get that, because, if you have loads of money to buy the pay transfer fees and things like that, it might have to be the loan market. But that's what I'll be looking to try and do, I think.
Well, that was what we did last season with the wing backs, and both left and right wing backs, as we alluded to before, because obviously we'd signed Ogbeta and we'd signed Ramsey at fullback, with the hope that there would be either replacements for, certainly compete with, Randall Williams and Declan Cogley. So that doesn't surprise me that you're pinpointing them 2 positions, to be honest with you, Gav.
Okay. Talk to me. Connor Carty is another one we've got. Wanted to touch on up top. Do you think he's going to get a loan move to the National League? Any idea where he's at with his development?
Yeah, I do actually. He suffered a anterior cruciate knee ligament injury whilst on loan at Doncaster last season. So he won't be going anywhere just yet, unfortunately for him. I think it really is unfortunate, because he obviously looked like he was showing promise. So yeah, that's a real shame, because he'll be probably, I'm guessing, injured until probably this mid this next season.
Yeah. Adebayo is another one I wanted to ask you about. Do you think? Do you see, even if we think Dion Charles, when fit, and Aaron Collins might be your best strike partnership, do you think Adebayo's physicality is going to be important in terms of offering a different dimension?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you look back at last season, Adebayo and Dion Charles were striking up a great partnership at the start of the season, and it looked like it was, really going to be promising for them. So much so I actually had a bet on with somebody on Twitter that Adebayo would get 15 goals last season. He got 10. But I think only that was because of injuries. I do think that if he'd have carried on with Dion, he may very well have struck up a good partnership with him, because he does offer you that different dimension, doesn't he? Although having said that, I do think Adebayo falls into that category of Dempsey, tall, to a lesser extent Sheehan, that if offers come in for them players, I've wrote them down, Morley as well, that they have to be considered, because for too long, Gab, long before we entered these 2 bottom divisions in English football, we've been very, very poor at selling players at the right time as a football club. Yeah. And that mantra is trying to change as far as the club's concerned. So I think Adebayo falls into that category as well. If a good offer comes in, you have to look at it.
Yeah.
It feels a little bit like I'm trying to sell all the Bolton players.
No, do you know what? No, Cole, I think you're right, because I think I think as a fan, you know, sometimes you want to have that mindset of no, let's keep our best players, and we want them here, and you know, you're almost a bit childish, but it's like no, I don't want other people to have our play. But I think from a business point of view, like football clubs are a business, you know, that they mean a lot to supporters and fans care about what happens on the pitch, but they're also a business. That side of it's important as well. You've got to be able to cash in at the right time. So I think that's an excellent point.
I just look at the other than Morley, I just look at the age of them players as well, you know, and whether or not you're ever going to get a better opportunity to cash in on.
Well, that's another point actually, because if I was, let's say theoretically, you were to get promoted this season to the Championship, I do kind of look at this squad right now, and I do kind of wonder how many players would theoretically be able to grow with you within the Championship. And I would probably say not. Yeah, Baxter, I think, would be able to grow with you in the Championship if you went up. Morley, maybe, if he could. But there's not many, I suppose, would be the point. So I can actually see the value in cashing in on your late 20s players while their value's high, and actually maybe starting to introduce a few younger players, as well as obviously you want to be really competitive in the here and now. But I think sort of trying to rejuvenate the squad a little bit with a few younger faces, I don't think that will be a bad thing.
Yeah, we haven't got many good young players, Gab, which would obviously allow us to kind of have that approach. All I'm saying is when.
Oh, do you think that's what? Sorry, I've got. I really want to hear what you have to say, but I've also got a thought. Do you think that's partly why? Do you think you need a bit more of a balance between youth and expert, where, in terms of, do you think you need a bit of exuberance coming into this side next season? Do you think that he missed a bit of that last season?
We missed Nous, Gab, last season.
Right.
We missed, if anything, we need more. In my eyes, we need more experience, but just at a higher level. But obviously, that comes at a cost. It's a difficult balance in it, because the mentioned players, Adebayo, Dempsey, Tull, Sheehan, them 4 players that I'm saying, if an offer came in, you look at it, all of them players are a year on, aren't they? Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
So therefore they've gained experience. So that's of benefit to you as a football club, innit? You know, so maybe looking at cashing in isn't the right thing for some of them lads. I question the mentality a little bit, having gone through what we went through last season, and whether they've got the minerals to take us forward. And I just think that experience is so important, and dealing with that expectation as well. But that leads me on to what probably one of my final points about this next season, Gab, is we need, and I'm guilty of as it more than anybody, with having high expectations. But I do think we need to temper our expectations a little bit next season, and maybe just be a little bit more realistic in terms of where we think we may finish and who we think we should and shouldn't be beating, because it's bit up on the arse too many times in recent months, to be honest. I think that might possibly be the downfall of why we didn't succeed last season, because, you know, naturally it does find its way back to the players, doesn't it? And they're not used to them type of pressures, are they? Because they've been used to playing for clubs who don't have the expectation. Do you get what I mean? So it's difficult. It's a big balance in that.
I hear what you're saying, but I don't know how you fight that. Do you know what I mean?
It's like, you can't.
Yeah,
just time, innit? Time.
Yeah, it's one thing to say we shouldn't expect too much and be realistic, but at the same time, I think football is a very emotional sport, and fans do feel passionate about it. And I think there are going to be expectations for Bolton this season, and that's kind of the challenge. But do you know what? I mean, mentality. It's really interesting, isn't it, Cole? Because we're having quite conflicting conversations, because on the one hand, we're saying that this is a squad in the sort of peak age to experienced side of the spectrum, where you're looking at a lot of late 20s players, not veterans really, but sort of certainly in that sort of late 20s bracket. And yet we're also seeing the mentalities in question. That's something you normally associate with, you use the word nice, experience. Not experience on paper. So so I'm actually wondering, is it actually a case of having maybe some fresh legs, maybe a bit of fearlessness, fearless, young, hungry players that are going to take the bull by the horns? For me,
possibly, but them players would probably only coming on loan, wouldn't they? If they were coming from a higher level, because they'd have to have the ability to be able to play in the team, wouldn't they?
Are we not risking doing a disservice though to players in League Two, for instance? Though,
well, very true. Because we just signed Laws, haven't we, from Crawley? He's 23, isn't it? So maybe that is the what they are looking to do with the players that they sign.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah, tricky. It's a difficult one. What about a question that I've had from Dan Berry, who watches our podcast, who tweeted me earlier? He's asked me to ask you, are you concerned in general about the stats when it comes to a team losing in the playoff final when they generally finish around 8th the following year? This versus the fan base's expectations of having to finish in the top 2. What are your thoughts on that, Gab?
Not overly concerned, actually. I'm not sure I necessarily buy too much into the mental hangover of losing the playoff final. I think it's more likely that teams who lose the playoff final might finish lower the following season because they might have had their best players picked, whereas clubs who didn't get there might have been able to keep hold of them and things like that. So I think it's a bit more situational than that. I don't necessarily think you lose the playoff final and therefore there's going to be a massive hangover. I think, if we say there's going to be 3 weeks between the playoff final and returning to pre-season training, and 2 full months between the playoff final and the opening game of the season, sometimes more. I don't know. I think that the time away is enough to process some of that disappointment, and then once you're back in pre-season training, you're focused on the new season. I don't put too much stock into that sort of mental hangover thing.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
What do you think?
Well, obviously the league's going to be a lot more competitive next season than it was the season just gone. So obviously it's going to be more difficult for us to be able to possibly compete in them top 2 spots. So maybe that'll be a contributing factor towards the hangover without us really realising it. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I don't see it be a hangover. I think the league is going to get tougher, but I don't think it'll be tougher because of the hangover. I think it'll just be tougher because the league's tougher.
Tougher, yeah. From a tactical standpoint, Gab, because I've had Dave BWFC85 tweet me earlier to say how much tactical flexibility do the other League One managers offer in comparison to Evatt? Because that kind of goes back to what we've just said about the league being stronger, and maybe these managers that are coming into it have got more, possibly better players and more tactical notes as well. He said that I don't watch too much of the other sides, but curious to know if they have multiple plans, formation, tactics and tweaks which change the game by game, or have a fan base playing too much FIFA, like ourselves, possibly.
Well, let me compare, say, Ian Evatt to somebody like Darrell Clark, because I think that would be an interesting one to discuss. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, Cole. So let me give you Darrell Clark, right?
So for the people listening who don't know, I think Darrell Clark is now in charge at Barnsley. Is that correct?
Yeah. So he very nearly kept Cheltenham up last season from an 11-game goalless start, right? But he's won promotions before with Bristol Rovers and Port Vale. Now Barnsley manager, like you say. So Darrell Clark is a very instinctive, intuitive manager. When he sees something that's not quite right in a game, he's going to be very ruthless, and he might make a substitution in the first half, or he might 10 minutes in make a formational tweak, or at half-time there was one game where Cheltenham were 2-0 down at Blackpool and playing awfully in the first half. Half-time he made 4 changes and they still might have lost 3-2, but it was a much improved second half performance. So basically the advantage of Darrell Clarke, right, is that his side will never go down without a fight, or very rarely, because he'll always want to try and change something and,
react type of thing.
Exactly, yeah. So I don't think Darrell Clarke in the dugout at Wembley, if Darrell Clarke was Bolton manager, I don't think the Oxford game happens, because I think Darrell Clarke would have changed something. However, I also don't believe that Darrell Clarke could have done what Ian Evatt's done in terms of cultivating a style by having that sort of continuity of principles and having those passages of play, because Darrell Clarke is a pragmatist. He's very good at adapting to circumstance. He's a very agile tactician, but he's not someone that's going to build an identity with a set formation, a set style over a number of years. That's just not how I see Darrell Clarke. So I guess the question for you, Carl, is the trade-off worth it with Ian Evatt? I think it is, personally, as long as he can learn some of the lessons from last season. But I do think that's going to be really interesting, whether he can refine his approach. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So what you're saying is Darrell Clarke would have got us promoted?
I think, well, no. So I'm not saying Darrell Clarke would have got you promoted, but I think, let's say there's a scenario where Darrell Clarke is manager in that playoff final. I don't think, I'm not saying you'd have won it with Darrell Clarke, but I don't think you'd have gone down without a fight. That's what I'm
putting words in your mouth. What I meant by that, Darrell Clarke would have got us promoted in that game.
Possibly,
But he wouldn't have got us there in the first place, is what you're saying.
Yes, that's probably what I would say, because I don't think he's. I think in terms of building a style as a technical coach, I actually think he's quite limited in terms of improving individual players and working on the training ground. But on match days, in the big games, he's very good at finding solutions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Is the trade-off worth it? There's no argument. There's no debating, that Ian Evatt has took us or improved us every year he's been in charge. And he's improved us from a league standing perspective, and he's improved us from an output perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So we are probably... He's in my life... It's hard to say, really, but... He's in terms of the way we play the game and the amount of goals we score and how entertaining we are when it works and when it goes well, then we're as good as I've ever seen us as Bolton Wanderers Football Club in my lifetime. The problem we have is when it doesn't work, it looks really bad.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to the point, he's improved us every single season. Whereas I don't think a lot of managers at the level that we're currently at, with the level of manager that we could expect to attract, would be able to do that over the course of a 4-5 year period. The proof will be in the pudding when it comes to it next season as to whether or not he can prove us again. Because this could very well be his final season in charge of us, because if he doesn't take us on again, then people are going to want to put his head on a stick, I would imagine. So is the trade-off worth it? I would say yes, because I like the way that we play the game, because it's easy to remember what it was like under Phil Parkinson, and previous to that, Gary Megson, and all these kind of so-called dinosaur football managers that play the game in such a poor, so-called poor style. So it's nice to watch. So I think it's probably worth it, but it's only going to be worth it if we take that one step further again this season, when we might have to go back to the drawing board if we don't.
What's required for that next one step then? Give me 1 or 2 tweaks that you've got to make in order to go from being a playoff side to a top 2 side.
Well, it's going to need more investment.
Okay.
And I think that's not me as a football fan obsessed with transfers and signings and announcements and money being spent and all that. because I'm not too bothered about that if you're producing the results on the pitch and you've got solid
I mean,
start.
Birmingham, my lot, Birmingham and Huddersfield, we've got investment, but we're also starting from a different position to Bolton. Like, you're really close to a top 2 side, and you've got a winning sort of dynamic already already close. Whereas
it's been worked on for a long time, hasn't it? And it's been worked on in these divisions where you have to 1 minute be playing at the Stadium of Light, and next minute you got to be playing at Burton Albion. And when it comes to your lot and Huddersfield fans, I don't think they really realise what they're gonna what to expect as a fan base. So that might very well work in our advantage, because the expectations of certainly Birmingham fans is going to be to get promoted straight away and win the league by 120 points, which just simply isn't going to happen, because anybody with any knowledge of League One, which I now have, realises that ain't going to happen. What do we need? I think it needs investment, and I just think it needs a little bit of. I need to try and attempt to do this myself. A bit of realism, I think, from the fans' perspective, in terms of treating each game as it comes and not presuming that we're going to beat every single team in the division, which doesn't really work like that.
No, okay. So a bit of realism.
Because it has a knock-on effect from the fans to the players, and I think we were a contributor towards us not making it over that's into that top 2 last season.
Okay.
And losing Baxter and Dion Charles for 2 or 3 months didn't help either.
No, that doesn't help. So I think definitely having Baxter for a full season and or a very good backup, and then having George Johnston's and that's another factor that's gonna make a difference. And then for me, I think probably adding that bit of bite in midfield that you've mentioned, and adding quality in the wing-back positions that's really going to give pin opposing defences back and give them something really to think about. I think that's 4 things there that could combined make the difference from playoffs to top 2. So I think,
let's be honest, what were we 4 points from the top 2 in the end, something like that. So we weren't far.
If you'd had George Johnston and you'd had Baxter for the full season, then you could have got top 2 last season.
Yeah, but other teams have injuries, don't they? I guess, but
But also, I think what Oxford showed in the playoff final is that if you limit Bolton by nullifying the midfield, and the wing backs need to be able to create more. So for me,
well, you got. I don't really want to think too much about the playoff final, but you have to give Oxford a huge amount of credit on the day. I think Des Buckingham got it spot on.
Yeah.
Ian Evatt didn't react. They hit Paris Magoma early doors, took him out of the game. Obviously, they realised that he was a threat. Then therefore meant that Ogbeta and the other side weren't really having the output. But at the same time, Dion Charles were playing with injections that we've since found out. So was Ricardo Santos. He was playing with injections into his calf. So they're not excuses, these, by the way. These are facts. That's what some of our best players were playing injured. So that doesn't.
Okay, Cole. But then shall we say, let's apply that to this season, Cole? Do you think so? You've kind of brought in Chris Farino, which means that Santos gets injured. That's not a problem. So you can put Farino in. I'm also wondering, is there one more striker to come in? Because I know you've said you've got Nlundulu, and I'm not saying he's a bad striker, but if we're saying consistency required to compete with possibly Birmingham and Huddersfield, possibly Peterborough, possibly any list of teams who could be right there, is it going to be 4 strikers required for 2 up top? Are you going to want to have that Manchester United 1999 thing where you got that rota of strikers, and if one gets injured, it's not the end of the world? Because let's say Dion Charles gets injured again, you've got Aaron Collins up top and Victor Adebayo, and then let's say one of them gets injured, then you're down to Nlundulu, and he's okay, but I don't know. Is there
that has to be an area in which we strengthen, because bear in mind that we've released Cameron Jerome and Jon Daddy Bob Vartan from the contracts, and obviously they was in the setup last season with Dion and Aaron Collins and Adebayo and Daniel Underloo. So if you read them players off, list them off on your hand, you'll quickly realise that we're going to need at least one more striker to add to that, and maybe that is that marquee player that we alluded to earlier, possibly.
Yeah, for sure. So, Colin, what's the biggest reason for you to believe that Bolton Wanderers will meet their ambitions this season?
I think the reason that the chance that we will reach our ambitions this season because we have a consistent method that works in the division to compete at the top of the division against the better teams in this division in the most part. And I think that the teams that we're going to be competing against may struggle to adapt. Certainly Huddersfield and Birmingham for the consistency across the whole season, which could help us obviously get into that top two. So I think the fact that we've been here and got the t-shirt is probably what I'm trying to say to you. Whereas the other clubs,
you've been here and not got the t-shirt.
Yeah, not in terms of winning it and getting promoted, but you know what I'm saying. Playing on a Tuesday night at Burton Albion, playing on a next week in front of 25,000, next week in front of 3,000 type of thing. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
Then be able to adapt to these environments and understand what it takes to win games away from home in tricky venues maybe are a benefit to us because obviously them teams that we're going to be competing against simply won't have been used to that. That's what I'm clinging on to. I'm certainly not as confident as I was last season about getting promoted, Gav, I have to admit.
Interesting. So then that leads me to ask you, Carl, what's your biggest reason for doubt?
Hangover. And I know you said it, man. You don't believe in it. You don't be a thing, but you have to think that there may be a hangover from playoff final, and if we don't get off to a good start, then it could be back to the drawing board as far as the managerial structure is concerned, which I really hope doesn't happen. But we need to start as we mean to go on, Gab, for the season. Otherwise, it might be. I
think there might be a hangover from a fan's point of view. I don't.
Probably more. Yeah, probably more external than internal. I got one there.
Yeah.
Because I think the lads will probably just draw a line under it. Professionals will draw a line under it and move on. But when things don't quite go right, the fans will quickly turn, and that's where my concern lies. Because as good as it is playing in front of 20,000 every week, it's good when it's going well.
Yeah.
And going back to your lot, Birmingham will probably find that this season. They'll probably lose to Mansfield at home or something like that. And then
we're going to be everyone's cup final, aren't we?
Well, that's what it's like, and it's like that for every game for us when they come to our place. And you have to have the players at your disposal who can manage that, but also manage the level that you're at as well. And that's that balance in it. And we were talking before about signing like a Wickham centre half and a lad from Crawley and stuff. And maybe that's the reason why we're doing that, because they know the level that they're at. You can't just go out and sign everybody, can you? And just expect them to be able to walk the league, because it doesn't happen very often. I think it's happened a few times in it over the years, but it doesn't happen very often.
No. So, with that in mind, then, Cole, you've said you're not as confident as you were last season. So, give me a number between 1 and 10 to denote your level of optimism that your ambitions are going to be realised.
10 being we're getting promoted, yeah?
10 being the most optimistic.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, it could all change because we might bring in players that make me think, bloody all right, we mean business here type of thing, and that could all change. But at the moment, I'd say I'm around a 6.5, 7 at a push in terms of optimism. And I am generally one of the, certainly on our podcast, more optimistic. Yeah, we'll beat everybody every week type of thing.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
you know what, Carl? I was expecting to have a slightly more bullish podcast about Bolton with you this evening. So that's interesting. That's given me a lot of food for thought for when I come to release.
Yeah, maybe it's maybe I mean it's 1st of July. The transfer window's technically only just opened today, hasn't it? So maybe we had this conversation in a month's time. It might be slightly different. Maybe if England were as crap as they have been, I might be a little bit more optimistic because that's affecting my mood as well. I'll be honest with you, watching them try and play football like a group of lads that have just got together on a Sunday league pitch, that could be affecting me. So maybe ask me again on the 9th of August and see where we are, Gav.
Absolutely. Well, we'll see. Plenty of talking points there. This has been this. Carl, thank you so much for your insight. I really appreciate your thoughts on Bolton Wanderers. Keep up the great work. Fanzone Podcast, and everyone, make sure you go and subscribe to the Fanzone Podcast because Colin do some excellent work. Get yourself subscribed to YouTube and on Spotify. Drop us a comment on YouTube. Let me know how you think the Wanderers are going to get on this season. If you're on Spotify, drop us a review if you've enjoyed this episode. We're back with another one very soon. And for now, goodbye.
Thank you very much.